Hey friend, welcome back to the Bible Tract Echoes radio broadcast. I'm Michael McCurry, your host. Thank you so much for taking of your time and investing it right here with me. I'm joined today by none other than the Director of Operations of Bible Tracts Incorporated, my brother-in-law as well, Austin Marriott. Now, Austin's been on the program before, but it was well over a year ago, if I recall correctly. He shared some of his background, his story. Of course, remember, you can always listen to previous versions or previous episodes of this broadcast on YouTube, on Facebook. You can listen on your favorite podcast player, of course, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, Stitcher, all of the above. If you find a podcast player that you can't listen to it on, let us know. We'd love to distribute it there as well. But we've had Austin on before, and he has been the Director of Operations for a few years now here at BTI, and he handles a lot of the day-to-day operations. We're going to ask him about that in just a moment. And let me tell you, if you have questions about the ministry of BTI, maybe a question that maybe I couldn't even answer well because it has to do with some of the more day-to-day things, or let's say you have a question about an order or something like that, did you know? You can contact us. Of course, you can call us, but you can also text me directly, especially if you just have a question about how this ministry operates, or maybe you'd like one of us to come by and visit your church and tell you about our ministry in person. You can text me at 309-316-7240. Again, that's 309-316-7240. While you're thinking about some questions, we're going to dive into talking about a gospel tract very quickly. And here's one, Austin, that you designed not long ago. It's called The Guardian. And this gospel tract, maybe actually, since you're right here, give us a little background on why this gospel tract was designed, where it came from, and why we put this gospel tract, which is pointed at law enforcement, EMS, fire, all that type of stuff. Why did we put this gospel tract together, and what was its genesis?
So this tract is based off of another tract that really has become very, very useful and a very effective tract called The Warrior. And one of our employees, actually, one of our guys that works here, his name is Matt Pearson. He is a former Marine and had served our country and had a burden for men and women who have served, who struggle and have just a lot of things from their past that they are trying to deal with, if you want to say PTSD, things like that. And he just had a burden about it. And honestly, it was before he was employed at Bible Tracts. He came to us. We had a working business relationship in another area, and he came and talked to us, and born-again Christian, and said he expressed this burden. And Brother Micah and him talked about it, and they worked together and wrote the tract entitled The Warrior. And personally, I've been able to hand that tract out dozens of times to servicemen and women in uniform. And it's an amazing tool because most of those individuals, they do not want to, and I understand our human pride, they don't want to admit that they're struggling. And so I hand it to them and I tell them what it is. I tell them that a Marine wrote it. And this is the way I give this to them. I say, you may not be dealing with this, but I bet you have a friend that is. And I guarantee you almost 90 to 95% of the time when I hand that tract to that serviceman or woman, there's a tear in their eye. And the appreciation that they have that someone would care enough to take the time to write something to try to be an encouragement to someone who is struggling. And so we've seen great success with The Warrior in the military realm. And I have churches all the time and individuals that contact us asking about a tract for first responders, for law enforcement officers, for firefighters, for EMTs, for those types of individuals. And a lot of times a church will have a special day honoring those men and women in their community, and they want to have something to give them. And we really didn't have anything that was really geared specifically to that. We had some other things that, again, were kind of more military focused, veteran focused, and servicemen and women, not really focused to our first responders. And so we were talking about designing a tract for that specifically. And as we began to talk about that, we thought about, The Warrior is very applicable. And so we took it and tweaked it, just kind of changed a couple of the words to make it more geared towards first responders. and we put that track together. It's been out now just for not very long at all, and we've seen some great responses, very similar responses to as it is when we hand the Warrior to a serviceman or woman. We're getting this similar response from our law enforcement officers and firefighters and EMTs, just showing them that we care, because they lay down their life for us, and they willingly do that, serve our community. And in the fact that someone would care enough to, and have enough concern for them, as much as concern that they have for us and protecting us and our life and our belongings and things like that. It's been a great interaction that we've had thus far with this track entitled The Guardian.
And I'd recommend to you, if you need a gospel tract for law enforcement, fire, any of the above, I'd recommend you go to BibleTractsInc.org and order this gospel tract today. We'll send it to you as soon as we possibly can. We might reach out to you with some more questions and get your order placed and in the mail ASAP. We'd love for you to use this gospel tract. You know, of course, that our gospel tracts don't do anyone any good on our shelves. They need to be in your hands, and you need to get them into the hands of lost people. Let me encourage you, BibleTractsInc.org today. And now, as we turn from talking specifically about a particular gospel tract, we're going to dive into a little bit more of the granular, the nitty-gritty, the behind the scenes. I think we've titled this kind of talk Beyond the Tract in newsletters and things like that. Of course, we'd love to make sure you're getting our newsletter. All of our donors for the past many years receive our newsletter. And of course, any donation of any amount allows us to print more gospel tracts. But as we talk beyond the tract, you are not only director of operations, but also lead designer, and you make sure designs like this gospel tract, The Guardian, come together. But we really have kind of two audiences that we think about and focus on. You're trying to figure out, what is the purpose? Well, the purpose of our gospel tracts is to see people come to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ, of course. Well, how does it happen? Well, Christians, people like you that's listening right now, have to be interested enough and like the gospel tract enough to use it. But then it's not good enough for the Christian alone to like the gospel tract. It has to be something that's eye-catching for a lost person as well. So talk for just a moment about the work, the thought, the prayer, the concentration that goes into each of these designs. We have about 50 different English titles, of which, if I recall, I think you probably designed or had a heavy hand at least in the design of every single one of them. Kind of big picture, what goes into the design of these gospel tracts?
So typically, when we most of our tracts were written by our founder, Dr. Paul Levine, and so we have the bones and the material already there. And so what I try to do is, when we are laying out a brand new design, I try to first read the track and really get the grasp of what the track is trying to convey. All of our tracks obviously get to the point of our whole purpose is to lead someone to the Lord, a gospel salvation track. But some of them approach it from a story, some of them approach it from a truth, a biblical truth, a verse. And so trying to take that and then get that into a visualization, if you will, on the front of it. And like you mentioned, when I first started here at Bible Tracts, and my whole life using gospel tracts all through childhood, growing up in a Christian home, I had never really pondered the importance of those two groups of people. I just always focused on what I thought. Oh yeah, that's a great looking tract. That's awesome. I love the way that looks. I love that it's full color. I love the glossy paper. And I just was focused on the audience of me, of the Christian handing out the gospel tract. And shortly, not very long after being here at Bible Tracts, Mike and I were talking, and as we were really starting to redesign a lot of the different titles, we began to ponder and figure out, and I remember one time we were just sitting there talking, and we talked about how important it is for a lost person that this tract speaks to them enough, because I need them to set down whatever magazine it is they're looking at, whatever periodical they got in the mail, whatever it is that's on their kitchen counter. I want them to set that piece of printed material down and pick up that gospel tract that someone handed them at the restaurant that day. And it has to be evoking enough for them to want to pick it up. And nothing against, individuals who print black and white or print, on copy paper. But we have here at Bible Tracts, we truly have a philosophy of quality over quantity, because I need that lost person to pick up this gospel tract, and I need them to read the content and read the truth of God's word, because that is what's going to change their life, is reading this tract. And so we need it to be sparking enough for them and interesting enough for them to desire to pick it up. And so we really go into that as we go into the design, and as we begin to pick out what we want it to look like, what colors we want to use. And we try to be very particular on that. Like the Guardian tract. On the front of it, you'll see it's an American flag. Obviously, really kind of geared for first responders in America. And then there's a thin red line and a thin blue line. And with our police officers, that's a big thing, the thin blue line. And with the firefighters, the thin red line. And I didn't know this, but with EMS, there's the thin white line. And so I learned that as we designed this track. And we tried to incorporate those things. So, because that's the audience who that track is for. The Guardian is for the guy who's going to see that and say, oh, the thin blue line. And that hopefully will pique their interest enough to open it and read it. And that really is the end goal. It doesn't, Mike and I talk about this all the time, it does not matter if you or I like a gospel track. It matters if it produces a result. Our whole goal here at Bible Tracts is not just to print millions of tracts, which we do, and not just to ship millions of tracts around the world, which we do. That's not the goal, though.
Right.
The goal is to see someone trust Christ. And if we can be more effective with that, and if it means we're printing a few less or we're shipping a few less, but it is a more powerful and effective tool, then so be it, because our goal is to see salvation.
And to that point, if I can be blunt, kind of a shot across the bow for your imagination as you think about this, I'll use some names, some brand names you know of, but Budweiser and BMW don't do junk with their marketing efforts. Now, we are not marketers, but we are ambassadors. Yeah. I don't see ambassadors show up to United Nations in Bermuda shorts and flip-flops. No, they come dressed, maybe there might be some cultural differences, but they come dressed in their best because they represent their nation. Well, we represent our home in heaven, and we represent our Savior, Jesus Christ. And so that's why we print the way we do. And if you have questions about that, let me give you the number one more time. I'd love for you to reach out. And we've had folks ask great questions along this line. You can text me at 309-316-7240. And as we end the week tomorrow, Brother Austin's going to join us once again. Have a great day for his glory. God bless.